Fritz was orchestrating his noon symphony in the kitchen, the aroma of garlic butter and veal stock drifting in when the doorbell rang like a wrong note. I was halfway through Wolfe's morning mail, sorting the circulars from the checks, when the sound sliced through his monologue on the idiocy of committee invitations. He stopped, mid-sentence, as if punctuation itself had offended him. "Archie," he said, low and resigned. I was already on my feet. "If it's another canvasser, I'll save us both the tragedy." The front door gave back a gust of cold April air, and a woman who had spent half her life fighting it. Her coat had lost a button, and her face had lost the habit of ease. She clutched a folded envelope the way some people hold grudges. "I need to speak to Mr. Wolfe," she said. "It's urgent. It's about the man who lives above me." That line earned her the trip up the hall. Any tenant problem that couldn't wait for a landlord probably had blood or police in the footnotes. I ushered her into the office, past the globe, the orchids, and Wolfe's expression of holy suffering at interruption. He closed the book he'd been dictating from, leaned back, and gave her the stare that stripped varnish. "State the matter briefly." She swallowed. "My name's Mrs. Eleanor Pratt. I live at 324 West 56th, second floor. The tenant in the room above mine, Mr. Lane, hasn't been seen for 4 days. But last night I heard him walking, only—" She broke off, gripping the envelope tighter. "Only the police say he left town Monday." Wolfe's brows twitched, the kind of motion that means the machinery has started. "You heard him walking. Describe precisely." "Slow, dragging, like someone hurt." I handed her a chair and a glass of water while Wolfe considered the air as if evidence might float in it. He asked for the building's owner, the number of rooms, and whether she was in the habit of counting footsteps. She answered in that flat, frightened tone of someone trying to sound sensible. When she finished, Wolfe said, "And this envelope?" "It came this morning, addressed to me in his handwriting, but it's empty." I took it, noting the neat cursive and postmark from the city's main branch. Mailed, apparently, the day after he was supposed to have left. No note, no content, just paper. "Archie," Wolfe said, "have you ever encountered a man who mails nothing? Not unless he's paying for the privilege." Mrs. Pratt's fingers twisted in her lap. "The police won't listen. They think I'm imagining things. But I know his step, Mr. Wolfe. I heard him at 2 in the morning. Wolfe frowned. "What induces you to come here rather than to a clairvoyant?" "Because I heard something else," she whispered. "A fall. And then nothing." That got him. His eyes closed halfway, the way they do when deduction starts, sketching its map. "You will leave the envelope," he said. "Mr. Goodwin will examine the premises. If I find your apprehensions groundless, you will pay the fee for my wasted afternoon. If they are justified, we shall discuss the remainder." She nodded gratefully, as if the price of being believed was a bargain. After she left, I said, "You don't buy it." "I seldom buy," Wolfe muttered. "I rent conjecture until verified." He tapped the envelope with one finger. "Empty paper, an economical announcement. Go, see what vacancy it conceals." I slipped on my coat. "You expect to find him upstairs, not out of town?" He grunted. If she heard a fall and he posted an envelope containing nothing, the man may still be present, in some condition rendering correspondence difficult. That's Wolfe for you. A man who can predict rigor mortis from stationery. The cab outside grumbled like a philosopher denied his nap. I gave the driver the address and settled back, watching Midtown roll by in its usual hurry to nowhere. 4 days missing, an empty letter, footsteps at 2 a.m. The arithmetic looked like murder with a sense of timing. By the time I reached West 56th, the building wore the same expression as Mrs. Pratt, tired, resentful, and ready to gossip. A hallway that smelled of boiled cabbage led to her door. She was waiting, hands knotted. "Up there," she whispered. "He rents the furnished room. I still hear, sometimes, I told her to stay put and took the stairs. The wood groaned under me. The air carried that stale sweetness of shut windows. Outside Lane's door I paused. Silence. Then a faint hum, electric and steady, like a forgotten radio. I knocked. No answer. I tried the knob, locked. The hum went on. I leaned close, and the scent that slipped through the crack wasn't dust or perfume, it was gas. The doorknob was cold enough to make me doubt the gas could still be running, but the hiss behind the panel told me otherwise. I stepped back, wrapped a handkerchief around my hand, and gave the lock one persuasive twist with my pick set. It gave up on the second try, and the door swung inward just enough for the smell to slap me full in the face. I hit the light switch with my elbow and shoved the window open before the first wave could finish the job. The room looked like a second-hand dealer's nightmare. Iron bed, cracked dresser, a shade that had given up halfway down. The gas heater by the wall was still murmuring like a guilty conscience. On the bed lay Mr. Lane, or what was left of his ambition to wake up again. His head was tilted toward the window, one arm hanging, the hand bluish. I crossed, turned off the valve, and let the air drag the smell away. Then I checked his pulse. None. Skin cold, eyes half open. The expression wasn't surprise. It was the tired look of a man who'd run out of other options. That's when I noticed the cord. Thin, frayed piece of brown twine trailing from under the bed to the heater's control knob, tied tight. Somebody had arranged for the gas to open after the door shut. Lane hadn't staged this goodbye by himself. I left the window gaping and called Mrs. Pratt up the stairs. "Stay back," I warned her at the landing. "You don't want this picture in your scrapbook." Her face went chalky. Oh God, I told them. I told the police." "Yeah," I said. "You just didn't tell them loud enough." The neighbors had already started their native ritual. The whisper through the wall, the cautious shoe scraping the hallway. By the time the first curious head appeared, I was on the phone to Inspector Kramer. His response was predictable. "What's Wolfe doing sending you to dig up my corpses?" "He's not digging," I said. "He's pruning. You'd better bring your shears." 10 minutes later, the street was half patrol cars, half gawkers. Kramer arrived with Sergeant Stebbins and his usual cigar. He gave me the kind of look that usually precedes paperwork. "You find him like this?" "More or less. He had the gas on, but someone else tied the string. I'd say suicide assisted by the absent-mindedly homicidal." Kramer grunted, bent over the heater. "Twine's old, frayed. Maybe he fixed it to keep the heat running. Maybe. Or maybe he didn't write that empty letter and walk out of his life just to sneak back and asphyxiate quietly. The envelope's at Wolfe's. You can take it up with him." That earned me a snort. "I'll take it up when he leaves his chair, which is to say, never." The medical examiner showed, a wiry man with the social charm of a filing cabinet. He muttered the usual things about post-mortem lividity and approximate hours. From what I heard, Lane had been dead since early morning. That killed Mrs. Pratt's 2 a.m. footsteps. But before I could explain that, she tugged my sleeve. "He wasn't wearing those shoes," she whispered. "What shoes?" She pointed at the pair under the bed. Polished black leather, faintly damp around the soles. "He wore brown loafers. Always. Those were in his trunk." Kramer heard that and crouched. He lifted one shoe, turned it over. The heel carried a smear of mud. Fresh, city kind. The kind that lives around alley drains. "Rain last night," he muttered. "Where'd he get mud this morning?" I said, "Maybe he took a midnight stroll before suffocating himself." He looked up. "You think someone dumped him?" "I think someone paid him a visit before dawn and made sure he wouldn't talk about it." Stebbins rummaged through the dresser. "No wallet, no papers, no rent receipts. Room stripped cleaner than a cop's conscience before lunch." Kramer stood, cigar twitching. "If Wolfe wants in, he'll get his chance. But this one's mine till it starts smelling of orchids." "That'll be quick," I said. They're already blooming." He didn't bother to answer. He left 2 men on guard and told me to beat it, which I did, but not before checking the hallway. A line of scuff marks trailed from the back stair to Lane's door. Heavy shoes, damp soles. I pocketed 1 scrap of the twine for Wolfe's microscope and headed down. Mrs. Pratt was waiting at her door, twisting her hands. "Was it murder, Mr. Goodwin?" "It's either that or a suicide that rehearsed too much." I gave her my card. "Stay handy. Wolfe might want to hear more about your insomnia." The cab smelled better than the room had, which was an unfair advantage. On the ride back, I tried lining up the facts. A man leaves town, mails a blank letter, then returns to die quietly while someone ties a string to his heater. The math refused to balance. When I got home, Wolfe was mid-argument with Fritz about herbs, which tells you his day had been perfectly normal. He looked up as I came in, nostrils flaring faintly. "You reek of combustion," he said. "I've been communing with the late Mr. Lane," I told him. He was holding a long conversation with carbon monoxide. "Alive?" "No. Assisted death, if you ask me." I handed him the scrap of twine and gave him the details, from the gas to the shoes to Mrs. Pratt's ears. He listened with the patience of a man whose brain counts in syllogisms. When I finished, he said, "The twine is trivial but significant. Mr. Lane was not alone when he ceased to exist. Kramer figured that out too. He's already planting flags. Let him." Wolfe rolled the twine between his fingers. An empty envelope, a falsified departure, a corpse arranged to appear suicidally considerate. Someone is tidying loose ends. The question is, whose? I said, "You'll get your answer when Kramer's done kicking the furniture." He closed his eyes. "Archie, call Saul Panzer. Instruct him to find out who owns 324 West 56th Street and whether the tenant above Mrs. Pratt paid in cash." "Sure. Want me to ask him what Lane did for a living?" "Only if you wish to know," he murmured. "I already suspect he did it for someone else." He opened his eyes again, heavy-lidded, the look that means the game's on, but he'll pretend otherwise until it suits him. I dialed Saul, gave him the order, and hung up. "Anything else?" "Yes, dinner. Fritz has veal, which I intend to treat with gravity. You may attend if you refrain from narrative." I grinned. "Meaning don't tell you about the neighbor who hears ghosts?" He waved a hand. "Ghosts are incorporeal. The sound of footsteps implies substance. We shall see whose." That was Wolfe's way of saying the case had started, without saying it. I left him to the veal and went to the front room, where the city lights had begun to smudge the windows. Somewhere out there was a pair of polished black shoes with mud from the wrong street, and the man who'd worn them was just beginning to step into our picture. The phone trilled just as I was deciding whether the city lights or Wolfe's silence were louder. He gestured without looking up, fork midway between plate and mouth. I took the call. "Goodwin," Saul Panzer said, his voice as smooth as a subway at 2 a.m. "Your address, 324 West 56th, belongs to the Grayson Holding Company. Paperfront? Real owner, one Mr. Carl Neff, attorney with offices on Madison." "Neff," I said, pacing toward the hall. "That name ring a bell with you?" Saul went on. "Lane paid cash every month. No lease. Rent collector's a messenger from Neff's office. Also, Lane's employment was at an import brokerage. Firth and Keenan. He hadn't shown up for 3 days. That figures. You check if the firm missed him enough to call?" "Already did. Manager said he quit. No notice, no forwarding address. Payroll envelope still on his desk." "Appreciated. Keep Neff in sight and see who signs his checks. Wolfe's buying." "Understood." I hung up and relayed the details while Wolfe sipped his beer like a philosopher, regretting that Socrates hadn't discovered malt. He chewed a morsel of veal, swallowed, and said, "Carl Neff. A name that has appeared before. though not commendably. He once represented a banker named Drossel, whose widow attempted extortion after his suicide. Looks like he's kept his clientele consistent. He inclined his head. Mr. Lane was under tenancy, but not contract. He occupied air owned by a man accustomed to veiling possession. It implies discretion purchased by fear or money. Maybe both, I said. You want me to drop in on Neff? Tomorrow morning. Today is for thought. The bell downstairs didn't wait for tomorrow. Fritz opened, then his voice drifted up. Inspector Kramer, sir. Wolfe sighed so heavily the orchids trembled. Let him in, Archie, before the man ruptures an artery on my threshold. Kramer entered with a cigar already smouldering and a file under his arm. Evening, Wolfe. You're quick off the mark. I hear your boy found our corpse before breakfast. Hardly my intention, Wolfe replied. Mr. Goodwin's talent for proximity to violence is congenital. Yeah? Kramer dropped into the red chair like it owed him rent. Then maybe you can explain what he was doing in that room. Performing a service for a client, Wolfe said. One Mrs. Pratt. She heard footsteps of a man pronounced absent. We verified her sanity. That's one word for it. We're calling it homicide, maybe robbery. Room was stripped clean. Kramer opened his folder. Preliminary report. No suicide note. No cash. Fingerprints smeared on the heater valve. Lane had a criminal record. Suspicion of embezzlement 5 years ago. Never indicted. You planning to take the case, or just make my life longer? Longer? Wolfe murmured. You mean less comfortable? Kramer ignored that. If I find out your client knew more than she said, I'll haul her in. Indeed, Wolfe said dryly. You'll need her address. Kramer scowled, realizing Wolfe already had it. Don't play innocent. I want that envelope you took. It was entrusted to me, Wolfe said. Its contents are empty, I finished, which makes it about as classified as yesterday's shopping list. Then it won't hurt to hand it over, Kramer said. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Not yet. Its emptiness is instructive. Meaning what? That someone wished to record a message by omission. The gesture of sending nothing can imply more than a letter's words, particularly if the sender knew he was soon to be unable to speak. Kramer glared. You're making poetry out of stationery. I'll get a warrant if I have to. Do, Wolfe said mildly. Meanwhile, drink some beer. It may lubricate your patience. He rang for Fritz, who appeared with 2 bottles and a look that said civilization might survive after all. Kramer didn't refuse. He drank, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and said, We're checking Lane's employer. Something's crooked at that brokerage. Missing shipment from Antwerp. Jewelry insured high. He handled the paperwork. That got Wolfe's eyes half open. Jewelry, you say? Interesting symmetry. A vanished clerk, a false departure, an empty envelope. Perhaps not so empty after all. Empty's empty, Kramer said. Not always. Emptiness can conceal content when the recipient expects it. Mrs. Pratt may have known what should have been there. I said she didn't act like it. She looked more scared than informed. Fear, Wolfe muttered, is often ignorance's twin. Kramer rose, pocketing his notes. If your genius turns up something solid, you know where to find me. And keep your nose clean, Goodwin. My nose, I said, has a filter for city corruption. He left with his cigar trailing like a fuse. The front door clicked, and Wolfe exhaled as if detoxifying. Archie, he said, tomorrow you will visit Firth and Keenan. Inquire about the missing shipment. The Antwerp connection may yield the key to Mr. Lane's final correspondence. And Neff? Mr. Panzer will observe him discreetly. I prefer my lawyers examined indirectly. I poured myself a glass from the beer Fritz had abandoned. You think Lane was fencing something? Possibly. But the mechanics matter less than motive. Why mail an empty envelope? To confirm an address? To assure someone of his silence? or to mark the completion of a duty? Could be all. 3, I said. He nodded. Then tomorrow we must determine to whom silence was valuable. The night folded in around the brownstone, steady rain tapping the windows, the orchids breathing their perfumed conspiracy. Wolfe resumed his chair and reached for a book, but I could tell from the slow rhythm of his thumb against the page that he wasn't reading. When I turned in, my mind kept replaying that faint hum in Lane's room, the twisted cord, the neat handwriting on the envelope. You'd think death had a sense of order. Morning didn't change Wolfe's appetite for facts. I was halfway through breakfast when he called from the office. "Archie, now." I went in with toast still in hand. He had a telegram unfolded before him. "From Saul," he said. "Mr. Neff left his office an hour ago, destination unknown, carrying a briefcase large enough to conceal either cash or cowardice. Saul is following. Want me to head uptown or stick to Firth and Keenan?" "Proceed as planned," Wolfe said. "Information before confrontation." So I did. The brokerage occupied 2 floors of a building off Park Avenue. The lobby looked respectable, but the receptionist's smile had the reflex of someone paid to misdirect. I gave her a grin and a name. Goodwin, Firth's friend from the insurance bureau. It got me to the manager's office. Keenan was a narrow man in a wide suit, with the kind of voice that suggests you owe him gratitude for existing. Yes, Lane was with us. Efficient, unobtrusive. We regretted his resignation. "When did he hand it in?" "Monday. Typed note, left on his desk." "Mind if I see it?" He hesitated, then opened a drawer and produced the sheet. I read it. The signature matched the envelope's handwriting, but the ribbon ink was faint, and the letter G had a hesitation mark. Someone had copied his style. "Nice stationery," I said. "Mind if I borrow this for the insurance boys?" "I'd prefer you didn't," Keenan said, smile thinning. "I'd prefer you did," I told him, and pocketed it. He didn't argue. His eyes flicked to the phone, but he didn't lift it. As I left, I caught a glimpse of a woman stepping out of the adjoining office. Tall, red-haired, eyes steady as if she'd practiced being unshakable. The nameplate read, "Miss Dane, Accounting." She watched me go as though calculating my resale value. Outside, the air felt sharper. Wolfe had been right. Lane's disappearance was too tidy. Someone had signed him out of life as efficiently as an expense voucher. She was still watching me when the elevator doors closed, that red hair catching the light like a warning. The ride down gave me 10 seconds to decide that Miss Dane would make a better witness than a suspect, at least until proven otherwise. Outside, the rain had thinned to a drizzle, the kind that paints the sidewalks without washing anything clean. I turned up my collar, flagged a cab, and aimed it toward the brownstone. Wolfe looked up as I came in, his hand poised above a chess piece like the board had just committed a felony. "Report." "Lane's resignation was a forgery," I said, dropping the letter on his desk. Same handwriting as the envelope, same hesitation in the G. Whoever typed it had the original sample in front of them and enough confidence to imitate, not duplicate. He adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. "And the employer?" "Keenan. Smooth type. Wouldn't let go of the letter until I smiled the right way. There's also a redhead in accounting who watched me like I was a new brand of dynamite. Name's Dane. Describe her?" "Tall, steady eyes, professional polish, with a touch of regret." "Regret?" She looked like she'd already lied once this week and wasn't sure it had been worth it. That earned me a faint nod. "Very well." "Saul?" I shrugged. "He was following Neff last we spoke. Want me to ring him?" Wolfe extended a hand toward the phone. I dialed, and Saul's voice came through crisp as a fresh dollar bill. Neff met a woman at the Belmore Cafe. Mid-30s, dark hair, grey coat, nervous enough to polish a teaspoon raw. He handed her a small package. She slipped it into her handbag and left. I tailed her to an apartment on West End Avenue. Registered to Miss Claire Dane. Huh, I said. The redhead's brunette twin. Not quite, Saul replied. Lighting in that cafe isn't flattering. Same woman, different disguise. She ditched the wig in the cab. Wolfe's eyes glinted. Excellent. Stay with her. Saul grunted acknowledgement and hung up. Wolfe settled back, folding his hands. A woman altering her appearance implies either fear or foresight. Miss Dane has both. Her association with Mr. Neff suggests she is intermediary rather than instigator. She also works in accounting, I said. If Lane was skimming jewelry through that Antwerp shipment, she could have helped. Or stopped him, he murmured, or killed him to prevent exposure. Fritz entered with coffee, set the tray down, and retreated, his timing flawless as always. I poured myself a cup, the warmth cutting through the damp still clinging to my coat. Archie, Wolfe said, locate Mrs. Pratt and invite her here this afternoon. Tell her we have a development requiring clarification. Meaning you want to find out if she recognizes Miss Dane's description. He nodded once. If she does, we shall determine whether our lady accountant was more than a tenant's acquaintance. I called Mrs. Pratt, who answered in the tone of someone expecting more ghosts. She agreed to come at 3. Wolfe used the interim to prune deductions as ruthlessly as Fritz prunes basil. When the bell rang, I showed Mrs. Pratt into the office. She looked smaller in daylight, coat buttoned to the throat, eyes darting from the books to the orchids as if they might judge her. Wolfe inclined his head. Madame, your courage in returning is appreciated. I'm not sure I should have, she said. The police came again. They think I'm foolish. On the contrary, Wolfe said. You heard what others refused to. Now look at this. He handed her a photograph. One of the staff portraits from Firth and Keenan that I'd lifted from the wall while no one was looking. Miss Dane's face stared out from the lineup, confident, cool, and much more alive than Lane's. Mrs. Pratt leaned closer, her breath caught. Her, she said. That's the woman who visited him. Twice. I saw her come up the stairs last week. She always carried a small parcel. What time? Wolfe asked. Evenings. Around 9. She stayed only a few minutes. Wolfe's lips tightened. And you did not mention this before. I thought it wasn't important. She looked respectable. Respectability, he murmured, is the most convenient mask for crime. She shivered. Then you think she killed him? I think she delivered something that killed him or fetched something after he died. You said you heard footsteps at 2 a.m. You are certain they were his? Yes. Then the body was moved, which means Miss Dane returned after his death. That snapped the air tight. Even the orchids seemed to listen. Wolfe leaned back. Thank you, madam. You have earned your vindication. Archie will escort you home. Outside, she clung to her purse like a lifeline. You'll tell me when you find out? You'll read it in the paper, I said, softening it with a smile. Back in the office, Wolfe was already reaching for the phone. Kramer, he said when the line picked up, I suggest you locate a woman named Claire Dane, employed at Firth and Keenan. You'll find her worth your time. Kramer's growl came faint through the receiver, followed by a crash that might have been his cigar tray. Wolfe hung up with the expression of a man who has just baited a bear and found the experience educational. I said, You realize Kramer's going to love that. He will investigate out of spite, which is still investigation, Wolfe replied. Meanwhile, you will go to Miss Dane's apartment. If she is absent, use the skeleton key you undoubtedly possess. Search for correspondence, particularly anything from Mr. Neff or Antwerp. That was my cue. 10 minutes later, I was in a cab heading west again, coat collar high, mind chewing on possibilities. Neff, Dane, Lane, the alphabet soup of larceny. The building at West End looked genteel enough to rent respectability by the month. I buzzed her floor. No answer. The door yielded to my pick like it had been waiting for company. Inside, the place was tidy to the point of fiction. No dust, no clutter, no framed family faces. On the desk sat a single ledger, open to a page with columns of numbers and 3 names in neat ink. Lane, Neff, Antwerp. The totals were tidy too. $30,000 worth of missing jewelry. I heard a sound behind me, soft, deliberate, like silk brushing wood. I turned. Miss Dane stood in the doorway, minus the wig, plus a small revolver that gleamed like it knew how to end conversations. "You're efficient, Mr. Goodwin," she said. "Too efficient." I kept my hands where she could see them. "Thanks. I try to keep busy between murders." Her mouth tightened. "You think I killed him? I think you mailed him out of existence and forgot the return address." "Lane was desperate," she said quickly. "He stole from the shipment. Neff promised to help, but he used us both. When I found out Lane planned to confess, it was too late. Neff made sure of that." "Meaning Neff tied the cord?" Her silence confirmed it. "Then you'd better put down that toy," I said. "You're going to need both hands to write the statement." She shook her head. "No, Neff still has the jewels. If I talk, I die." The gun didn't waver, but her eyes did. Fear and guilt were wrestling for the referee's whistle. "Listen," I said. "Wolfe doesn't let his witnesses die. He considers it a personal affront." Something in that landed. The barrel dipped a fraction, then steadied again. "I'll think about it," she whispered. "Think fast," I said, because the sound of footsteps was already echoing in the hall, heavy, methodical, coming our way. Whoever it was, he didn't knock. The footsteps stopped outside the door, heavy enough to rattle the knob. Miss Dane's hand twitched, the revolver lowering a fraction as if her nerves had remembered decency too late. I stepped sideways, slow and deliberate, toward the curtain beside the desk. Whoever was outside hesitated, then tried the latch. It held for exactly 1 heartbeat before the door swung inward. The man who entered was Carl Neff, looking like a lawyer who'd misplaced both his ethics and his alibi. He froze when he saw the gun in her hand and me in his client's living room. "Put that down," he snapped at her. She didn't. "You said you wouldn't come here." "I said a lot of things," he muttered, then looked at me. "Goodwin, isn't it? Wolfe's errand boy. You're trespassing." "I've been called worse," I said. "You're a little off your route, Neff. This isn't Madison Avenue, and the decor's light on affidavits." He closed the door behind him carefully, which was smart. It kept his escape tidy. "You have no authority to be here." "I don't need any. Your presence is confession enough." Miss Dane's voice cracked. "Carl, he knows. He knows everything." Neff's expression flattened into something bureaucratic and dangerous. "Then he's worth exactly what you are." His hand went inside his coat. I didn't wait to find out if it was for a weapon or a wallet. I kicked the desk chair sideways. It hit his knees, and the gun he'd half-drawn clattered to the rug. I had him by the wrist before he could decide to die heroic. Miss Dane gasped and dropped her revolver. It hit the floor with a dull thud. He tried for a dignified tone while I relieved him of his hardware. "You'll regret this assault, Goodwin." "Sure," I said, "but I'll regret it from the comfort of the brownstone instead of a coffin." I called Wolfe's number. Fritz answered, bless his domestic soul, and handed the phone over. Wolfe's voice came calm as a chess clock. "Report. I've got Neff and Miss Dane, both armed, both nervous, both ripe for cross-examination." "Splendid. Bring them here at once, but intact. Kramer will want witnesses, not corpses." Neff started to talk. I shut him up with a glance that had persuaded better men. "You heard the man," I said. "We're all going for a ride." The trip downtown was quiet, except for the sound of Miss Dane breathing through guilt. Neff sat with his jaw locked, hands clasped like they were rehearsing for court. When we reached the brownstone, Fritz's eyebrows went north, but he opened the door wide. Wolfe was waiting in the office, a mountain of calm behind his desk. He eyed our guests like they were mismatched curiosities. "Mr. Neff, Miss Dane." His voice could have chilled boiling water. "You arrive at an inconvenient hour, but a convenient juncture." Neff tried the lawyer's smile. "I demand counsel." "You shall have it," Wolfe said. "For now, I require conversation." Miss Dane sat where I guided her. Neff remained standing as if gravity required a retainer. Wolfe turned slightly toward me. "Proceed." I gave him the condensed version, Lane's forged resignation, the package exchange, the revolvers, the ledger from her desk. Wolfe listened, eyes half shut, like a judge grading perjury. When I finished, he said, "Miss Dane, was Mr. Lane your accomplice?" She flinched. "No, he was frightened. He wanted to confess. Neff said he'd help him, get him out of the country, but he only wanted the jewels." "Did you know he intended to kill Lane?" "No, I swear I didn't. I went there after, to make sure he was gone." Her hands twisted together. "But the letter, Lane mailed it to warn me. It was supposed to hold the receipts. He must have realized Neff would intercept them." Wolfe turned to Neff. "And you, sir? Will you deny it?" Neff's composure cracked around the edges. "Lane was stealing from the firm. I merely managed the recovery." "By tying him to a gas heater?" Wolfe asked softly. Neff's silence filled the room like static. Wolfe leaned forward. "Your ingenuity is misplaced. You imitated Lane's hand for the resignation, mailed an empty envelope to establish departure, and reclaimed the stolen property through Miss Dane, whose conscience you misused. An elegant chain, but brittle." Neff sneered. "You can't prove any of it." Wolfe smiled, a small, contented curve. "Proof is Kramer's function. My function is comprehension. You have provided that admirably." The doorbell rang again, punctual as a moral reckoning. I went to answer it. Kramer stood there, hat dripping, cigar clamped between teeth. He took one look inside and grunted. "Hell, you beat me again." "Habit," I said. "Come in. We've got your missing pieces gift-wrapped." He entered, eyed Neff and Miss Dane, and sighed like a man watching his ulcer form. "You really enjoy doing my job, don't you, Wolfe?" Wolfe gestured to the captives. "I prefer to believe I simplify it." Kramer lit a fresh cigar, the smoke carving his scowl. "You want to tell me how you nailed them?" "Not at all," Wolfe said. "But you may infer. The details are self-evident to anyone with a mind unburdened by official procedure." "Fine," Kramer said. "I'll take them down. You can sit here with your orchids and your self-satisfaction." He motioned to the uniforms waiting in the hall. Neff didn't protest. Miss Dane only looked relieved, which was its own confession. When the door finally closed behind them, Wolfe exhaled deeply. Pfui. I detest human perfidy before lunch. I dropped into the red chair. "Then you'll have to postpone digestion till tomorrow. Kramer's going to come back for a signed statement." Wolfe frowned. "He may have my signature, but not my conversation. The case is concluded." I raised an eyebrow. "We didn't recover the jewels." "They will be found in Neff's office safe," Wolfe said, already turning toward the beer Fritz had set on the stand. "Thieves of his caliber seldom distribute risk. You may confirm it if you wish. I have no such curiosity." I grinned. "You'd rather be right than thorough." He lifted his glass. "Always." The house settled into silence again. Rain ticked the windows. Somewhere below, Fritz resumed the quiet sounds of culinary sanity. I leaned back, watching Wolfe drink and pretend the world outside was merely theoretical. He said finally, "Archie." "Yeah?" "Do not allow Inspector Kramer to return after dinner." "I'll tell him you're allergic to justice." Wolfe closed his eyes. Accurate enough. I waited until Wolf's eyelids had drifted halfway shut and his fingers started drumming their silent metronome on the arm of his chair. That's how I knew his mind wasn't asleep, just simmering. The beer glass sat half full beside him, untouched since his last pronouncement of finality, which, in our experience, was as permanent as weather forecasts. "You're not done," I said. His eyes opened, slow as curtains. "Define done." "When you tell Kramer the jewels are in Neff's safe, you're betting on intuition. If they aren't there, he'll be back, loud and wearing a new ulcer." "Archie," he murmured, "I'm not wagering. I'm concluding." I grinned. "Then let's call it an investment in peace and quiet. Suppose I confirm it." He sighed through his nose, the sound of reluctant permission. "Very well. Use your discretion, though I suspect you'll prefer to use your legs." "I'll take both." I stood, grabbed my coat, and left before he could find a proverb to pin me down. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle that clung like stale breath. Kramer's squad cars were gone, leaving the street looking almost respectable again. I flagged a cab, fed it Neff's office address, and watched the driver's eyebrows rise. Law firms aren't usual midnight destinations unless you're delivering subpoenas or corpses. The building loomed respectable in the way marble always does, pretending it hasn't seen dirt. I let myself in with a universal key and an attitude of entitlement. The office lights were out except for a faint glow under Neff's private door. I eased it open. Inside, the place looked like its owner. Expensive, neat, and guilty. The safe crouched behind the desk, combination dial gleaming faintly. I tried the obvious. Birthdays, bar associations, moral codes, but none of those worked. Then I remembered Neff's favorite number from the ledger. 30,000. 3 quick spins later, the lock clicked open like a man giving up his last defense. The jewels were there, packaged neat in velvet pouches inside a manila envelope labeled "Property of Firth and Keenan." Wolfe had been right again, and I hated how unsurprising that felt. I took a quick inventory, snapped a couple of photos for the record, and shut the safe. I was straightening up when I heard it, the whisper of shoes against carpet. Too light for Kramer, too confident for a janitor. I turned, hand halfway to my pocket, and met a pair of eyes I didn't expect to see again that soon. Miss Dane stood in the doorway, rain on her coat, expression calm enough to fool a priest. "You're thorough, Mr. Goodwin." "I try," I said. "You're supposed to be explaining things to Kramer, not following me around." "He'll get his explanation, but I had to make sure the evidence was safe." She stepped inside, closing the door. "Those jewels belong to the clients. They were never mine. I thought if I brought them to you, it would tidy your conscience." Her mouth tightened. "I didn't kill Lane." "I believe you," I said, "but you keep showing up where bullets grow. You're making belief expensive." She looked toward the safe. "Neff's ruined. I heard him admit it in the car. Kramer's men took him straight to headquarters. He won't talk. He will when Wolfe explains the geometry of his trap." Her eyes flicked to mine. "He frightens me, that man of yours. He doesn't shout, but he makes the world rearrange itself." "That's the idea," I said. "Now, why are you here really?" Her voice dropped. "Because there's someone else." The sentence hung there like smoke. Define someone else. Lane wasn't the only one stealing. There was another account, a second shipment. Neff didn't know, but I found it when I checked the ledgers. The Antwerp shipment was a cover. The real transfer, artworks, not jewelry, was signed out under a false consignee. The initials were MC. "Ever meet him?" She shook her head. "Only his telegrams. Always short, always paid in cash." I leaned against the desk. "So the case isn't done after all." I didn't dare tell Kramer. He'd assume I was fabricating to save myself. "You're assuming Wolfe won't." She smiled faintly. He's too clever to dismiss a lead that might prove him wrong. That, I had to admit, was fair. We left together, her step quick beside mine, the city dripping shadows around us. Back at the brownstone, Fritz met us at the door with the expression of a man debating between coffee and calling the police. Wolfe's brows rose when he saw her again. "Miss Dane," he said, voice level but frosty. "Your persistence rivals my orchids. I trust you bring a purpose." She did. She told him everything. Neff's confession, the hidden account, the mysterious MC. Wolfe listened without interruption, only his fingers twitching near the edge of his desk blotter when a new angle appeared. When she finished, he said, "Archie, fetch the ledger." I laid it before him. His forefinger traced the last line, the initials written in Lane's hand, MC, followed by an unfamiliar code of numbers. "Mr. Kramer," Wolfe said thoughtfully, "will be displeased to learn that his case was incomplete." "He can take a number," I said. "What's your hunch?" He tapped the ledger. "The code is an overseas account. Antwerp, indeed. The final entry is a date. Today. Someone expected a transfer to proceed despite Mr. Lane's demise." Miss Dane looked stricken. "You mean the buyer?" "Or the partner," Wolfe said. "We shall discover which before midnight." I frowned. "Midnight's not far." "Precisely. That is why you will call Saul Panzer. He will locate the office that manages international wire confirmations for Firth and Keenan. If a message was sent today under those initials, I want its destination. And if there wasn't, then," he said, "someone here forged another layer of deceit, and intends to finish what Neff began." Miss Dane rose. "You think I know who?" "I think you will, once you recall who else at the firm had access to these codes." Her eyes widened slowly, realization dawning like a wound reopening. "Keenan," she whispered. "He always checked the ledgers himself. He said it was routine." "Routine," Wolfe repeated, a word behind which more crimes hide than any other. The clock on the mantel ticked toward 11. Wolfe's gaze moved to me. "Archie, get the car. We are calling upon Mr. Keenan." That woke me up better than caffeine. "You're leaving the house voluntarily?" He gave me a look sharp enough to cut disbelief in half. "A necessity. When human greed threatens to multiply through bureaucratic channels, one must prune at the root." I grabbed my coat before he could change his mind. Miss Dane stayed frozen, hands clasped as we moved toward the door. "Stay here," I told her. "You're safe in this zoo. Fritz bites only when cornered." Wolfe was already in the hallway, hat slightly askew, impatience manifesting as gravity. The rain had stopped, leaving the street slick and reflecting the glow of the cab headlights. As we stepped out, he muttered, "Mr. Keenan has misjudged the arithmetic of crime. It is my duty to correct him." I couldn't resist. "And Kramer's going to love the invoice." He didn't answer. He was already composing it, in Latin probably. The cab hissed to the curb outside the Park Avenue building like it disapproved of the hour. Wolfe lumbered out behind me, collar up, expression grim enough to discourage meteorological interference. The night still glistened from rain. Reflections ran along the pavement like nervous accomplices. Keenan's office occupied the top floor, respectable, discreet, and locked. I handled the last part with my pick set. Wolfe muttered something about burglary being an inelegant necessity, which, coming from him, was practically a benediction. Inside, the place smelled of polish and stale cigars. The only light came from a green-shaded desk lamp still burning behind a half-closed door. Wolfe motioned me ahead with 2 fingers. I pushed the door open. Keenan was there, alive, which was disappointing but not unoccupied. He stood at the filing cabinet with a briefcase half-packed, and his face, when he turned, wore the exact expression of a man who's just remembered leaving the gas on at a murder scene. "Goodwin," he barked. "What are you?" Then he saw Wolfe. The question wilted. "Mr. Keenan." Wolfe said, voice measured and polite as a hangman's bow. "We are here on behalf of your conscience. I'm told it has been misplaced." Keenan blinked, tried to recover, failed. "I don't have to listen to this. It's nearly midnight. Get out before I call security." "I assure you," Wolfe said, "security has already been summoned. By the law, if not by your better judgment." "Sit down." Keenan didn't move. His fingers tightened on the handle of the briefcase. I stepped in, took it, and put it on the desk. He glared, but sat. Wolfe advanced to the middle of the room, hands behind his back, the picture of indulgent doom. "Mr. Lane's death was inconvenient to you. He intended to expose the falsified Antwerp account, an account that concealed your second theft, not his first." Keenan opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "That's absurd. Lane was the thief." "Yes," Wolfe said mildly, "but only in the manner you required. You let him take the blame for the first shipment so you could appropriate the second without notice. A fine strategy, until Mr. Lane grew introspective. I said, and then you sent Neff to handle cleanup." He looked at me sharply. "Neff acted on his own." "Of course," Wolfe said. "He usually does. On retainer. Unfortunately for you, Miss Dane learned too much. You thought she'd destroyed the ledgers, but she kept them, hence this evening's impromptu relocation." Keenan's jaw shifted. "You can't prove—" "Proof bores me," Wolfe interrupted. "Truth interests me, and truth, Mr. Keenan, is seldom tidy. Tell me, did you expect the wire transfer to clear before Lane's corpse cooled?" That hit something. His eyes flicked toward the phone, involuntary. "Ah," Wolfe said softly. "So it has not yet cleared. Good, then we are in time." I went to the desk, picked up the receiver, and caught a dial tone that purred like a guilty cat. "Want me to order coffee or the police?" "Neither," Wolfe said. "Call Inspector Kramer and instruct him to meet us here immediately. He will enjoy interrupting an embezzlement in progress." Keenan shot to his feet. "You can't." I gestured with the phone. "Watch me." While I spoke to Kramer, Wolfe seated himself with deliberate precision in Keenan's own chair, folding like a reluctant mountain. He watched the man pace behind the desk as though studying a particularly clumsy insect. When I hung up, Wolfe said, "Mr. Keenan, you have 12 minutes before Inspector Kramer arrives. In that time, you may compose either a statement of explanation or a performance of remorse. I suggest brevity." Keenan stopped pacing. "You don't understand. I was forced. Pressure from the buyers." Lane panicked. Neff insisted there was only one way. "There is always only one way for men of your stripe," Wolfe said dryly. "Down." The clock on the wall ticked out the silence. I could almost feel Keenan's brain trying to assemble an exit strategy from fragments of lies. He reached for the briefcase. "Don't," I said. He ignored me. His hand went inside, not for papers, but for something metallic. I was on him in half a stride, slammed his wrist to the desk, and the revolver skidded away. He froze, panting, then sagged like his spine had resigned. Wolfe frowned, more annoyed than alarmed. "Mr. Keenan, attempting melodrama in my presence is both futile and vulgar." I pocketed the gun. Kramer's going to love this prop. Wolfe's gaze shifted to the phone again. "Call Miss Dane. Instruct her to come here immediately. She must identify the signatures on the forged documents before they vanish into police custody." "She's not going to enjoy the reunion," I said, dialing. Her voice, when she answered, was brittle but steady. I gave her the address, heard her sharp intake of breath, and hung up. 10 minutes, I told Wolfe. He nodded, attention returning to Keenan. "You might occupy yourself by confessing verbally before you are compelled to do so in writing." Keenan didn't respond. He stared at the desk blotter like it contained instructions for resurrection. The elevator bell dinged somewhere below. Wolfe didn't move, but his expression softened fractionally, as though inevitability pleased him. Miss Dane entered moments later, coat damp, eyes shadowed. She stopped short when she saw Keenan, then squared her shoulders. "You were supposed to protect the firm," she said. He tried for dignity. "You wouldn't understand." "I understand Lane died because of you," she said quietly. "And because I didn't speak sooner." Wolfe gestured to the desk. "Miss Dane, if you please. Identify these entries." She stepped forward, glanced down, and nodded. "That's his signature, and the false consignee mark. The initials MC stand for Marston and Coyle, an art dealer in Antwerp. But they don't exist." "Exactly," Wolfe said. "A phantom firm to receive phantom art. The theft disguised as export, the payment as insurance transfer. Elegant bookkeeping, Mr. Keenan. Lane discovered it too late. Neff silenced him, believing he acted to protect your common interest. You, in turn, prepared to vanish with the remainder. Your briefcase, I assume, contains the bearer bonds." Keenan swallowed hard, then slowly opened the case. Inside were 3 envelopes, thick and unashamed. Wolfe nodded. "Inspector Kramer will be delighted." Speak of the devil. The door opened, and Kramer arrived with 2 plainclothesmen and the usual cigar fugue preceding him. He took in the scene, grunted, and said, "Well, I'll be... You couldn't wait till breakfast?" "Truth," Wolfe said, "rarely keeps office hours." Kramer waved his men forward. "All right, Keenan. You're under arrest, and if you breathe wrong, Goodwin here will be happy to demonstrate his enthusiasm." As they took him, Wolfe leaned back with a sound halfway between a sigh and a growl. "Archie," he murmured, "remind me never to leave my house again." I grinned. "I'd say the city owes you for services rendered." "Fay," he said, "the city is ungrateful, and so am I." Miss Dane stood silent, tears gathering but refusing to fall. Wolfe turned to her, unexpectedly gentle. "Madame, guilt misplaced corrodes more than crime. You have acted belatedly, yet decisively. That suffices." She nodded, voice barely audible. "Thank you." Kramer signed the paperwork on the spot, took Keenan away, and left the office smelling of smoke and victory. Wolfe rose, brushed imaginary dust from his sleeve, and headed for the door. "Come, Archie. I've tolerated enough virtue for one evening." Outside, the air had gone cool and clean, the city rinsed of its earlier grime. Wolfe climbed into the cab like an emperor reboarding his throne. "Will you tell Kramer where to find the art shipment?" I asked as we pulled away. "In the same ledger," he said, settling back. "He'll discover it after breakfast. I prefer not to deprive him of employment." He closed his eyes. "Drive home, Archie. I require beer and silence." The cab rattled through the wet streets, the tires whispering against the asphalt. Wolfe had gone inward again, eyes closed, lips set in a straight line that meant the machinery upstairs was still ticking. I didn't interrupt. When he goes silent after a case, it's either digestion or deduction, and the wrong word can turn one into the other. We rolled up to the brownstone. Fritz was already at the door, robe neat, eyes reproachful at the hour. Wolfe brushed past him with a grunt and headed straight for the office. I hung up my hat, followed, and found him standing at the Globe, staring at it as if Antwerp owed him money. "Beer," he said, not turning. Fritz disappeared and returned with 2 bottles and glasses. Wolfe poured with ceremony, filled the silence with his own gravity. I waited until he'd had his first swallow. "So," I said, "the ledger, the jewels, the art. Kramer's got his parade. What's left?" "Repercussion," Wolfe murmured. "A case is never concluded until all its echoes cease." "Meaning Miss Dane." He nodded once. "She will be summoned as witness. Kramer will flay her gently, but the press will not. She was complicit in silence, and silence is seldom forgiven." I took a sip. "You could give her a testimonial." "Bah, Sentiment. I do not distribute absolution. You already did, I said. You told her guilt misplaced corrodes. That's philosopher talk for forgiveness. He looked at me then, slow and steady, the corner of his mouth twitching. I was prescribing hygiene, not grace. Before I could answer, the phone rang. I picked it up. Kramer's voice came through gruff and tired. Goodwin. Tell Wolfe he's a louse, but a useful one. We cracked Neff's safe, found the jewels, and Keenan's singing arias in the holding cell, but— Always a but, I said. Give. But somebody tried to break into Firth and Keenan's warehouse an hour ago. Guards scared them off. Looks like they were after the art shipment you two mentioned. The consignee crates. Thought your fat boss might want to know who's cleaning up the leftovers. Wolfe, hearing Kramer's tone through the receiver, motioned for it. I handed it over. Inspector, he said, if you wish to apprehend the scavenger, post men at the warehouse immediately. They'll return before dawn to complete the theft. You may also inform your men that whoever orchestrated the embezzlement had at least one additional confederate. That confederate will attempt to destroy the shipping records. Kramer snorted. You think this is still going? I know it is. Greed rarely retires gracefully. He hung up without a farewell, which meant agreement in his dialect. Wolfe handed the phone back. I said, You're telling me someone besides Keenan and Neff had their hands in the pie? Precisely. A pie seldom attracts only 2 flies. Any guess which one's buzzing next? He gave me the look that precedes orders. Archie, retrieve the ledger once more. I did. He flipped it open to the final pages, eyes narrowing. Observe. The entries after the falsified Antwerp line, these were in another hand. Different penmanship, different mind. The flourishes, more self-conscious, as though mimicking professionalism. I suspect this imitator was a subordinate attempting to obscure his own role. Examine the signature initial here. I leaned in. Looks like an L. Could be Lane's. No. Lane wrote with his pressure on the downstroke. This writer emphasizes the lift. Miss Danes, perhaps, but more likely a male. Someone in the same office accustomed to handling correspondence, yet not accounting. The shipping clerk, perhaps. I straightened. You're thinking the warehouse attempt was his doing? I'm certain of it. Mr. Keenan's arrest would alert his confederate that the documents are vulnerable. He will seek to erase evidence of shared culpability. So we sit and wait for Kramer to catch him. Pfui, Wolfe said. We go to the warehouse. I nearly dropped my glass. You mean, again, leaving the house? He was already reaching for his coat. This evening's precedents have destroyed restraint. Since Providence insists on our participation, we shall indulge it once more. Fetch the car. 5 minutes later, we were back on the street, the night cool and damp. The city had that hollow sound it gets near 3 a.m. Empty trucks, dripping awnings, the occasional siren yawning in the distance. The Firth and Keenan warehouse squatted along the riverfront like it had been built by tired men for tired goods. A police car was parked near the loading dock, 2 uniforms on watch. Kramer wasn't there yet. Wolfe's expression hardened. Observe, Archie. The human predilection for underestimation. 2 men for $1 million crime. We approached. The younger cop looked at us suspiciously until I flashed a grin and a name. Goodwin, Nero Wolfe's agency. You've heard of him? The other one said, Yeah, he eats my salary in a day. Accurate, Wolfe murmured. Now step aside and keep your eyes competent. Inside, the warehouse smelled of oil and damp wood. Rows of crates lined the floor, shadows deep between them. The lamps overhead threw a yellow haze that didn't quite reach the corners. Wolfe's eyes scanned the floor. Footprints, wet, fresh. I crouched. 2 sets. One small, one heavy. The small ones came first. Then we are not alone. Something shifted behind the stacked crates. A faint scrape, then the hollow thud of a closing box. I drew my gun. Wolfe raised a hand, forbidding haste. We moved forward together, me circling left, him keeping to the aisle's shadow. At the far end, a figure knelt by an open crate, flashlight beam trembling. A man in overalls, thin, nervy, with the kind of face that memorizes exits. The crate's label read, Antwerp Consignment, MC. "Hold it," I said. He spun, dropped the light, and bolted. I cut right, grabbed his arm before he cleared the aisle. He fought like desperation had given him a gym membership, but I've handled worse. I shoved him against the wall, got the cuffs on, just as Kramer burst in through the side door with his men. "Goodwin," he barked. "What the hell?" "Caught your warehouse ghost," I said. He was about to finish the job. Wolfe stepped forward, adjusting his cuffs as though crime scenes required sartorial precision. "Inspector, this gentleman's name is likely Leo Pratt, the shipping clerk at Firth and Keenan. I infer the surname from a smudge in the ledger's last entry." Kramer glared at the captive. "That right?" The man's eyes darted everywhere but at Wolfe. "I didn't kill nobody. Keenan promised I'd get a cut. He said Lane was gone, that nobody'd missed the records." "Your initiative," Wolfe said coldly, "has cost you more than your employment." Kramer motioned his men to take him. "We'll sort it at headquarters. You can file your sermon later, Wolfe." We watched them load the thief into the car. The air outside had that first pale smear of morning, the kind that pretends it'll make sense of the night. Wolfe exhaled heavily, a sound between weariness and disgust. "Archie, I've exhausted my tolerance for mankind." "Meaning the case is really over now?" "For the moment." He glanced toward the river, the gray water catching the first light. "I may forgive humanity tomorrow. Tonight I require breakfast." We drove home through streets rinsed clean of deceit, or at least the temporary kind. Wolfe went straight to the kitchen. Fritz had eggs and coffee waiting, which made me suspect telepathy. When Wolfe finally sat with his plate, the corners of his mouth eased. "It appears," he said, "that even corruption is punctual. It always concludes at dawn." I poured coffee for both of us and thought he might almost be smiling. Wolfe had eaten 3 forkfuls of eggs before speaking again, which meant the machinery was reheating. His fork hovered, eyes half-focused on the air above the table, and Fritz and I exchanged the kind of look you save for thunderstorms you can't dodge. "Archie," he said at last. The Pratt creature confessed to participation, but not to the origin of the Antwerp fabrication. "He said Keenan told him Lane was gone," I reminded him. "That tracks. Keenan was the brain, Pratt the broom." "Not sufficient," Wolfe muttered. "Lane was no fool. He would not have accepted blame unless persuaded by more than intimidation. There remains an emotional hinge, and I detest unaccounted emotions." "He was probably scared stiff," I said. "Fear is a blunt instrument." He mailed an empty envelope, not a plea. That was a message to someone specific. I leaned back. "You're thinking Miss Dane again." His look cut through steam like a carving knife. "Thinking. I'm concluding. The woman's attachment to Lane was personal, though she disguises it with guilt. It alters the arithmetic. She said she was afraid of Neff. She was afraid of love betrayed, an older malady, and more stubborn." Fritz cleared his throat discreetly and escaped with the dishes. I poured myself coffee and waited for Wolfe to keep unraveling the thread. He didn't, not immediately. Instead he rose, an event requiring effort and intention, and crossed to the globe. "Archie," he said, "call Saul Panzer. I want Miss Dane here again. This morning." I frowned. "You think she's still asleep after last night? Then wake her." I did. Her voice over the line was tight, the tone of someone caught between exhaustion and regret. She agreed to come. Wolfe had settled back by the time I hung up, his fingers drumming the armrest in short, precise taps. "She will arrive anxious," he said. "You will disarm her. Tea, not coffee. Offer sympathy with a hint of incredulity. Got it, I said. Charm, but with seatbelts. She must tell us what she omitted. Something vital lies in what she did not volunteer. The bell rang within half an hour. She entered pale, eyes bruised from lack of sleep, but her posture had that brittle composure of people determined to be strong for the wrong reasons. I led her in. Wolfe inclined his head. Miss Dane, please sit. Mr. Goodwin will pour you tea. She managed a wan smile as I set the cup in front of her. Inspector Kramer said everything was finished, she began. For him, perhaps, Wolfe said. For truth, not yet. She stiffened. What else could there be? He studied her in silence for a count of 5. You loved Mr. Lane. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. That's irrelevant. On the contrary, Wolfe said softly. It explains why you delayed exposing the fraud, why you visited his room after death, and why you continued to protect a man who had deceived you. You wanted to understand him before you condemned him. She trembled, but kept her chin high. You make it sound sordid. It was tragic, Wolfe said. He trusted you with the receipts, the proof of the Antwerp theft. But you were not the intended recipient of the empty envelope. It was mailed to you by habit. The message was meant for another. She frowned. For whom? That, he said, is what we must discover. Tell me, Miss Dane, who else knew of your relationship with Mr. Lane? No one. Impossible. You were seen dining together twice in January. Mr. Keenan was not a man to overlook such details. Her face drained of color. He mentioned it once, she whispered. He said it could look improper. He warned me to be discreet. Wolfe's voice hardened. Precisely. He used that knowledge to manipulate you. When Lane threatened confession, Keenan told you the police would treat you as his accomplice. He assured you that silence would protect your reputation and him. She covered her face with her hands. Yes, he said I'd lose everything. I believed him. Wolfe's tone softened. You're not unique, Miss Dane. Men like Keenan prey upon both conscience and vanity, but your cooperation, however reluctant, gave him opportunity. You carried one of the receipts to Neff's office the night before Lane died. Her hands fell away. How could you know that? Observation. The ink smudge on the ledger you brought me was of a different color from the others. The blotter on Neff's desk matches it precisely. She sat rigid, as though confession had been waiting behind her eyes for permission. He said he only needed to verify the numbers. I didn't know it was for forgery. I swear I didn't. I believe you, Wolfe said. But the falsified record created a chain that ended with murder. Every link must be visible before I declare this matter ended. She swallowed, then looked straight at him. Is that why you called me? To say I helped kill him? To say you can help explain why he died, Wolfe corrected. Lane's conscience was not clean, but something drove him to mail that envelope, to send nothing but silence to someone he trusted. That gesture was deliberate communication. To you, it seemed meaningless. To the true recipient, it was a warning. Then who? I asked. Wolfe's eyes flicked toward me, mild reproach for rhetorical impatience. The answer lies with the postal record. The letter was mailed from a branch near Firth and Keenan's warehouse. Mr. Lane was there retrieving the first shipment's inventory for audit. Someone followed him. Neff? I asked. Unlikely. Neff would delegate. Pratt was already compromised. That leaves a hand we have not yet seen. Miss Dane's voice broke in. There was another, Mr. Carlson, our overseas liaison. He handled all customs papers. He left for Antwerp last week. Wolfe's eyes half closed, a predator scenting resolution. Excellent. The initials M.C., Marston and Coyle, were his fabrication, derived from his own name. He devised the phantom consignee, Keenan financed the theft, Neff arranged the silencing, and Lane, upon discovery, attempted to warn the only person he trusted not to destroy the message. Me? she whispered. Yes, Wolfe said. He addressed the letter to you because he had already written to Carlson separately. His empty envelope meant, the proof is gone, beware the rest. Tragically, you misread it. Her eyes filled, but the tears didn't fall. Then he died trying to protect me. Indirectly, Wolfe said. He died trying to prevent the collapse of what little decency remained among his colleagues. The phone rang again. I picked it up, recognizing Kramer's impatience in every vibration. Tell your boss that Antwerp police just grabbed one of ours, Carlson, tried to board a freighter with fake manifests and half a dozen paintings from the missing shipment. He's yelling for an American lawyer. I relayed it. Wolfe merely nodded, as if the universe had confirmed his paragraph. Inspector, he said into the receiver when I handed it over, I congratulate you on the arrest. You may tell your colleagues abroad that comprehension preceded capture. Kramer grunted something unprintable. Wolfe hung up, exhaled, and turned to Miss Dane. You are free, madam. But I suggest you resign from Firth and Keenan. Moral contagion lingers. She rose unsteadily. What will happen to me? You will survive, Wolfe said. It is the lesser triumph, but sufficient. I escorted her to the door. When I came back, Wolfe had already leaned back in his chair, the case folded away in his mind like a file in perfect order. Well, I said, that's all of them. Neff, Keenan, Carlson, 3 men, 1 crime, and 1 overworked detective. 2 detectives, he said quietly, though one of us insists on narration. I'll take the compliment, I said, heading for the hall. You want me to call Kramer tomorrow for confirmation? Don't insult him. He'll call when gratitude requires exorcism. He closed his eyes again, hand resting on the arm of his chair. Archie, bring beer. This time, 1 for yourself. Wolfe didn't drink beer the way most men do. He regarded it, inhaled it, and then accepted it as though the glass had just confessed something profound. I sat across from him with my own and waited for him to say the inevitable "Pfui." When it didn't come, I knew the gears were still turning. He spoke without looking up. Archie, we have reached conclusion, but not equilibrium. There is one strand I dislike leaving untied. If it's about Kramer's gratitude, don't worry. He'll tie that one around your neck himself. He ignored me. Lane's empty envelope, its contents, though absent, carried implication. He meant to send receipts, proofs of theft. Yet why mail it at all if he had already informed Miss Dane of his suspicion? Because he didn't, I said. He was protecting her by omission. The guy figured silence would keep her clean. Wolfe's eyes flicked open. Silence rarely protects. It implicates. I detest sentimentality, even in corpses. There was another reason. He reached for the ledger again, flipping through until his finger stopped on a margin note, faint but deliberate. Safe. P. He looked at me. You see it? Yeah. Safe. P. Means what? Pratt. Precisely. Mr. Lane may have hidden one genuine document in Pratt's custody without the man's understanding. I sat forward. Then we're still sitting on evidence nobody's seen? Yes, Archie, which means either Pratt is concealing it or Kramer's men overlooked it while congratulating themselves. I was on my feet before he finished. I'll go check. You will go carefully, Wolfe said. Mr. Pratt is not intelligent enough for deceit, but he may be desperate enough for improvisation. I grabbed my hat and headed for the door. The precinct was alive with the low hum of bureaucracy digesting victory. Kramer spotted me the moment I stepped in. If you're here for applause, you're late. We already sang hymns to your employer's ego. I'm here for Pratt, I said. Wolfe thinks he's still got something stashed. Kramer's cigar twitched. That clown. He's been singing since dawn. If he had anything left, it'd be tattooed on my blotter. Then humor me, I said. Let me look at his stuff. He grunted but waved me through. The interrogation room smelled of sweat and guilt, 2 things you don't bottle but always recognize. Pratt sat slumped, hands cuffed, face grey. He looked up as I entered. I told them everything. I don't know what else you want. Something Lane gave you, I said. A document, a package. Maybe you thought it was nothing. He frowned, eyes flickering as memory poked at him. He handed me an envelope a week ago. Said it was for company records. I threw it in my locker. The cops took my keys. I turned to the officer guarding the door. Get that locker opened. 10 minutes later, Kramer was there too, muttering oaths that would have scorched varnish. Inside the dented metal box, under a pair of greasy gloves, lay a sealed, manila envelope. No label, no markings, just like the one mailed to Miss Dane. Kramer slit it open with his penknife. Inside were 3 receipts, authentic shipping dockets stamped by Antwerp Customs, showing the true consignment values and destination codes. They were signed not by Lane or Keenan, but by MC, Marcus Carlson. Well, I'll be damned, Kramer muttered. That fat genius of yours wasn't guessing. He doesn't guess, I said. He predicts reality and waits for it to arrive. Kramer stuffed the papers into a folder. Tell him the city owes him another ulcer. I didn't wait for the rest. Wolfe would want it fresh. Back at the brownstone, the office was a fortress of calm. Fritz had cleared breakfast, and Wolfe sat with the ledger open again, reading it like scripture. I laid the new envelope on the blotter. He glanced up. Ah, confirmation. Straight from Pratt's locker. Carlson's signature, clean and cocky. Then Lane's riddle is resolved. He trusted the one honest man in his circle, the dullest. That's one way to define irony. Wolfe smiled faintly. Justice is rarely poetic, but sometimes the rhyme amuses me. He leaned back, folding his hands. This final document will assure extradition. Carlson will face trial in both countries. Kramer will preen. Miss Dane will fade from headlines. Mr. Pratt, having performed unwitting service, will likely serve only months. It is sufficient, I said, and you'll go back to orchids. Yes, their perfidy is limited to aphid infestation. I dropped into my chair. So that's it, huh? The tenant upstairs, the empty letter, the whole mess tied up with bureaucratic ribbon. Essentially. But he didn't move. His eyes stayed on the ledger. I knew that look. It meant there was one thread left, too fine for police work but too irritating to ignore. Out with it, I said. He gestured toward the file. Lane's handwriting changed on the last day. Look at the curvature of the L. It slants rightward, a man reconciled, not afraid. Meaning? Meaning he knew his death was probable and accepted it as atonement. I cannot admire such foolishness, but I acknowledge its rarity. He closed the ledger with a soft thud. It is over. The doorbell rang before I could answer. Fritz's voice floated in, followed by a hesitant step. Miss Dane entered again, hat in hand, eyes clearer this time. I'm sorry, she said. I know you've done more than enough, but I wanted to thank you. Wolfe inclined his head. You are welcome, madam. I'm seldom thanked, and I assure you it is unnecessary. It isn't, she said. Lane's name won't stay buried because of you. I just needed to see the place where truth was spoken. That was too much even for Wolfe's patience. Truth, Miss Dane, is rarely spoken. It is deduced. She smiled faintly. Then thank you for deducing mine. She left as quietly as she came. Wolfe's eyes followed her to the door, then returned to me. Archie, record this case as The Tenant in the Room Upstairs, a title of irony and precision. The tenant was guilt itself. I nodded. You're getting poetic in your old age. Pfui, he said at last, the sound escaping like the universe exhaling. Bring the beer. I did. The bubbles rose. The light caught the glass, and in that comfortable silence, The brownstone settled back into its natural order. Crime concluded, humanity chastened, Wolfe restored. I brought the beer, set it down beside him, and watched the foam settle like the curtain after a play that had gone exactly as written. Wolfe took one sip, sighed through his nose, and leaned back, the rare posture of a man who had run out of words worth billing. The orchids above his head caught the lamplight, pale and watchful, like a jury that had already delivered its verdict. "You've been quiet," I said. He looked at me over the rim of the glass. "There is peace in completion, Archie. Even for you, I suspect." "Peace? Sure," I said. "But it's got lousy timing. Every time we wrap one, the silence feels like a funeral." "That," Wolfe said, "is because you mistake activity for vitality. The world continues, whether we chase it or not." I grinned. "That sounds like you're trying to convince yourself." "Pooh." He set the glass down with a small, satisfied click. "I require no persuasion, only a competent secretary. I'll settle for the raise you keep threatening me with." He closed his eyes. "The threat is incentive. If I rewarded you, your insolence would become unmanageable." I was about to make a rejoinder when the phone rang again. Fritz answered, then called from the hall, "Inspector Kramer, sir." Wolfe made a noise halfway between a growl and resignation. Admit him before he decides to batter the door. Kramer entered with his hat still on and a cigar that had survived more interrogations than most suspects. He looked almost cheerful, which on him was suspicious. "Well, Wolfe, it's official. Carlson signed a full confession at the consulate. Antwerp police are packaging the art for return. Your theory's airtight. I'd hate you more if it weren't so damn useful." "I'm gratified by your resentment," Wolfe said. "It affirms my purpose." Kramer dropped into the red chair, puffing. "Lane's story made the headlines. You might even get thanked by the commissioner. Don't let it go to your head." Wolfe arched an eyebrow. "My head is adequately occupied." I said, "If the city hands out medals, I'll take Wolfe's. He's allergic to ceremony." "Keep dreaming," Kramer said. He stood, fished in his coat pocket, and pulled out a small folded slip. "One more thing. Found this in Keenan's effects. Thought you'd want a look." Wolfe gestured. I took it from Kramer and unfolded it. A single page torn from a ledger, written in Lane's hand. Across the top, faint pencil scrawl read, "For her. Tell her truth survives." Kramer said, "Didn't mean much to me, but your fat friend collects riddles." He left before Wolfe could compose an insult fit for reproduction. The door shut softly behind him. I handed Wolfe the page. He studied it, expression unreadable, then placed it carefully beside the beer glass. "So," I said, "that's Lane's epitaph." "Hardly," Wolfe murmured. "It is an epilogue, one that speaks better than I could. His truth did survive, through the agency of fools and villains." "That's you being modest again." He ignored that. "Archie, file this case under human frailty." Subheading, "Occasionally redeemable." I smiled. "That's a new category." "It will not need expansion," he said. "Now record expenses, including the damage to my patients." I took my notebook, but the lines blurred for a second as the quiet of the room settled deep. It wasn't the silence of absence, it was completion, the kind that fills the air instead of emptying it. Wolfe noticed, of course. He notices everything. "You're thinking sentimental nonsense," he said. "Maybe," I admitted. "But for a guy who claims to hate people, you spend a lot of time saving them from themselves." He made a small sound. "Observation, not affection, motivates me." "Sure," I said. "And beer is just hydration." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Archie, go to bed before you ruin my evening with philosophy." I started for the door, then stopped. "One thing, boss." He didn't look up. "What?" "That tenant in the room upstairs. He got justice, didn't he?" Wolfe's eyes lifted, heavy-lidded and steady. Justice is a human abstraction, Archie. But truth is a fact. That will suffice. He turned back to the paper, the lamplight outlining his silhouette in gold, and for a moment the brownstone felt smaller, quieter, complete. I left him there with his beer and his truth, and as I reached the hall I heard the faint click of the glass meeting the desk again, the sound of final punctuation.